Hi everybody, welcome to Grand Travel Plans. In this episode, we're doing a road trip around the Santa Barbara wine country. This episode is brought to you by the Wine Acuity app. Learn about wine while playing tasting games with your friends. Available at the Apple Store and on Google Play. You're probably wondering what would be so grand about a short driving tour up the California coast to the Santa Barbara wine country. Well, it's not where you're going sometimes, it's how you're going. So Kathy and I are going in this. This is a 2014 Porsche Cayman S. It has 325 horsepower, the engine's in the middle, and beauty is this thing, we can fit everything for a weekend into the car. We have all our bags, all the camera equipment, everything packed. We're ready to go. Our friends, Mike and Vicky, they took a different route.
We decided to go with something bright and flashy, something that had aerodynamics involved. It also has a front engine. Notice the massive front on this car. 755 horsepower, 1.3 side Gs. Essentially slicks, but they do have some tread on the inside to make them somewhat legal. But the most important feature, like John and Kathy, we can get all of our weekend supplies in there and we'll be happy.
We decided to start our journey the right way by heading to the Pacific Coast Highway since it's much more scenic than driving the freeway. Plus, we wanted to add more twisting roads to these two driving dream cars. From Canaan Road, we turned onto Mulholland Highway and then onto Encinal Canyon to get the cars warmed up. The road twisted its way down to PCH and we were given some amazing ocean views. We made our way up PCH to the 101, then past Santa Barbara to the no longer secret Highway 154. The 154 winds its way inland through the Santa Ynez Mountains and over the scenic San Marcos Pass. Our first stop was lunch at the Cold Spring Tavern. This unique bar and restaurant once was a stagecoach stop back in 1868. If you haven't been there, you need to go. Stepping into the tavern is like stepping back in time, with rustic yet beautiful stone fireplaces, unique antiques, and animal skins. The food is quite good and the portions are certainly large enough to share. There really isn't another place like it anywhere we've seen. As we left lunch, we stopped for a photo op under the historic civil engineering landmark, Cold Springs Bridge. At the time the bridge was constructed from 1962 to 1964, it was one of the longest steel arch bridges in the US and the first major arch structure to use all welded steel sections. We did not know there were these things called civil engineering landmarks. Next, we backtracked slightly so we could climb Painted Cave Road and take some sweeping views of the coast and the mountains. The road is twisty and occasionally only one lane, so it's not recommended for anyone with large cars, but in our adult go-karts, it was a blast. The sweeping vistas and seeing out to the 4 northern Channel Islands in the distance made this a must-see. We continued up the road past the Chumash Painted Cave Park and its comically dangerous parking up to Camino Cielo to get some views into the Santa Barbara Mountains. Continuing our drive, we ended up at the well-marked viewpoint off Highway 154 with the Santa Ynez Valley below us. This seemed to be one of the main viewpoints as it had maps, history boards, and telescopes for viewing. After exploring the area, we continued our journey along 154, which now felt like an arrow-straight superhighway. Our next stop was the town of Los Olivos for some wine tasting now that all the challenging driving was over for the day. Los Olivos is a quaint little village with a population of 1,000. There are 38 different wine tasting bars here, many of which are owned by wineries. As always, we chose to go to the Los Olivos Tasting Room and Wine Shop. It was the first tasting room in Los Olivos and opened back in 1987. Chris, the second-generation owner, is a great source for local wines and features tastings from wineries throughout the Santa Barbara and the Central Coast areas. So you're probably wondering, why am I talking to you from this alley? Well, a few years ago, there was a movie called Sideways made in this area, and this alley is a significant place in the history of wine in the United States. In that line, Miles was brought aside by his friend and told not to become a bummer on the date they were having in this restaurant. And he made the comment that if someone orders a Merlot, I am effing out of there. It destroyed Merlot sales in the United States. The graphs have an amazing drop. This is a significant place in U.S. wine history because of that. Next, we made our way to our home that night, the Ballard Inn and Gathering Table. The town of Ballard is a short drive from Los Olivos, and it was easy to find the beautiful mansion-style bed and breakfast with its charming and welcoming landscaped grounds. We went in to register and found out that they have a wine and cheese social for guests. We grabbed a plate and sampled some wines and sat on their front porch to relax after a day of inspiring drives. The inn isn't huge, so be sure to book early. The rooms were large and clean, and each was decorated differently. We had made reservations for dinner that night at the on-site restaurant, the Gathering Table, which is run by the owner and chef. The menu offered fresh local cuisine with an Asian flair and was delicious. After dinner, we made our way to one of the common living areas, and the hotel manager was nice enough to light a fire for us. We opened a delicious bottle of Herman Story Syrah that we got at the Los Olivos tasting room, broke open some rum cake that we brought from our trip to the Grand Caymans recently, and sat back and relaxed. The next morning, we had our complimentary made-to-order breakfast in the restaurant and headed out.
Okay, it's morning. There's a storm coming in tonight, and that means we have to get out of town before Mike's car has the tire problem with too much rain.
Our first stop was the touristy little town of Solvang. It features Danish-style architecture with lots of local eateries full of Danish desserts and pastries. We walked the main streets, and Kathy and Vicky popped into a few of the stores. As the morning progressed, the streets and parking became much more crowded. We were happy to be getting out of there early. We then made our way down Mission Avenue. Only a few miles away was Ostrichland, USA. We'd never heard of this unique farm before and only found it by accident as we were scanning maps for our trip. It seemed like an interesting place to stop, but we really weren't sure what to expect. It definitely had more visitors than we had thought there would be, but it's a big place and there was plenty of room. It cost $5 per person to get in, an additional $1 to feed the big birds. We bought our food, learned how to handle feeding these massive birds without losing digits, as they've apparently learned how to take the food containers from visitors, and headed to the ostrich pen. What's going on here?
Feeding ostriches. Very professionally.
The animals were kept in very large pens that had plenty of room to roam. There are numerous feeding areas, and they have both ostriches and emus.
The females are gentle.
Yes.
The males are
Messy.
big.
Oh, you got a girl coming up behind you? Oh. We're at Ostrichland and we're feeding the emus now, who seem to be a little more gentle than the ostriches. And quite smaller, I might add. And fluffy. So pretty looking.
You are a very delicate eater, sir. Or ma'am. I didn't mean to insult you. I'm sorry.
Afterwards, we looked for lunch. On a prior trip, we'd tried to get lunch at a well-regarded local restaurant called Industrial Eats in Buellton. So we decided to give it another shot. This time again, we were turned away because of large overflow crowds. We can't vouch for how good this place is, but we can tell you it has plenty of visitors. We decided to go just down the block to another restaurant, the Figueroa Mountain Brewery. Even though we weren't drinking beer before our upcoming drive, we did enjoy the food and the iced tea was perfect. Since the weather didn't turn bad yet after lunch, we decided to go further north to Foxen Winery. It meant taking the Porsche and the Vet on some gently winding roads through gorgeous scenery. As we turned off the 101 and made our way on the Foxen Canyon Wine Trail, it did start to drizzle a little. We passed numerous wineries including Firestone, Fess Parker, and Zaca Mesa, and we drove through beautiful vineyards, pastures, and rolling hills until we came up to our destination. Foxen has two different tasting rooms. The first one we came upon is the newer of the two, and they featured their Burgundy and Rhone varietals. The Pinot Noirs and Syrahs were up to the winery's high standards. We then headed up to the original tasting bar, featured in the movie Sideways, better known as The Shack. Here we tasted their Bordeaux and Italian-style wines such as Merlots, Cabernet Sauvignons, and Sangiovese. After our half-hour stop, the rain had tapered off, so we decided to take our chances and head to our original destination of the trip. We set out north and passed more wineries such as Cambria, Byron, and Kenneth Volk, The road was narrow, windy, and had several hairpin turns. It had a rustic, one-lane mountain feel. Kathy even saw 2 deer standing by the road as we passed. After an exhilarating 30 minutes, we came to Highway 166. The 166 is a more straightforward drive. It wasn't crowded and offered wide open vistas and unique rock formations. The road is speckled with only a couple of very small roadside towns such as Kuyama and New Kuyama, so it's best to make sure you have all your needs prior to heading out on this road. The sky was getting much darker, and we were hoping that we could make it to the 33 before the storm rolled in. Fortunately, it wasn't until we reached the 33 that it actually started to rain a little. We had a light drizzle for the rest of the trip, but it wasn't enough to affect the cars. The 33 cuts through the rugged Los Padres National Forest and is full of twists and turns and switchbacks. We were surprised how high the elevation reached, which was over 5,100 feet. So be sure to check the weather and road conditions before you make this drive. For the first half of the drive, we were the only cars on the road and got to enjoy one of the best driving roads in all of California. This road is right up there with Highway 1 through Big Sur, the Angeles Crest Highway, and the Mulholland Highway. It's every sports car driver's dream. As we started to get closer to Ojai, the traffic started to build behind day-tripping minivans. Once we made it through the windy road, through tunnels, around traffic, we knew the majority of twists were over and much of the rain had passed, so we decided to stop for dinner in Ojai. We happened upon the Ranch House, which is a historical and magical place. It was one of the original farm-to-table restaurants. They offer a 3 or 5 course meal with very reasonable prices. The food was fresh, creative, and delicious, and the ambiance was perfect. We suggest trying the pate with cognac for your appetizer and the elk for your main course. They were both outstanding dishes. We arrived right as they opened, so we were lucky enough to be seated without a reservation, but the restaurant quickly filled up. After this delightful dinner, we made our way through Ojai back down to the easy freeway drive home. The trip only took 2 days, but we felt like we'd seen a week's worth of sights and adventures. We spent quite a bit of time driving on roads we had never seen before. The views were inspiring, and we were fortunate to stay and eat in some really unique and enjoyable places. If you're interested in seeing a part of the state that doesn't get many visitors, balanced with a couple of major tourist draws, this is the road trip for you. If you have a car that eats up winding roads through beautiful mountains, this drive is hard to beat. If you have any suggestions for other places to visit in this area, or would you like to suggest places for us to visit, please share in your comments below. Thanks again to our sponsor, the Wine Acuity app. Learn about wine by playing tasting games with your friends. Available at the Apple Store and on Google Play. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.